Tell us about the most awkward encounters you've had with your viewers, in real life, in person, with your face. Okay.
Delicious. Give me my Oscar. Again. Welcome, guys. Now, once in a while, I get to experience what it would be like to be in a horror movie. When I open my inbox to reveal someone has sent me a photo, and it's a photo of myself sitting alone in a public place with all my friends, and I'm sitting there unaware that someone is capturing me on their phone. To the person that does it, I don't imagine they realise how sinister it can feel, and it usually comes accompanied with the same sort of comment. "Oh my god, Chris, I think I saw you today. I wanted to come and say hi, but I was too nervous." Laugh out loud. Now, if you see me in public, in stark contrast to my abroad in Japan sarcastic persona, I'm actually quite nice, normal and friendly, perhaps even boring. In fact, you'll be like, "Oh wow, you're so much more handsome in real life." The camera adds £10, dare I say £50. You know, I understand it might be a bit weird and it might be a bit scary, but do come and say hello. Honestly, what's the worst that could happen?
Sorry, excuse me, are you Chris from abroad in Japan?
Yeah, it's me. It's Chris from abroad in Japan. Before the end of the world happened and people used to come to Japan on this thing called a holiday, it was quite common to bump into viewers in everyday life here. By my estimate, I've bumped into well over 1,000 viewers. And it's a lot of fun. It's like meeting a friend you haven't seen in a long time. Like, it just feels fun. And I don't think I've ever been a dick to any viewer that I've ever met. Of course, someone will prove me wrong in the comments. And if you have met me somewhere, let me know, how did it go? And if you haven't ever met me, please make up some fan fiction that makes me look good. But I can probably count the worst encounters, the most awkward ones, on one hand. And so, let's do it. We've got a story on a train, a story in a restaurant, and our first story begins in the place where I bump into more viewers than anywhere else in all of Japan. So outside of a meetup event, I'd say the record for the most number of times I've bumped into viewers is probably about 15 or 16 times in one day. And it's always around Asakusa in Tokyo, which is unsurprising given it's the most touristy part of the entire city. So on this occasion, I was in Asakusa and I took some photos for Instagram and Facebook so I could be like, whoa, look at me, I'm in Asakusa, innit? And in my defence, this was back in like 2014 when I hadn't really been to Tokyo much. Every time I went to Tokyo, it felt like I'd unlocked a new map or unlocked some new quests, you know, quests that admittedly involved just getting drunk. But at the time, I had a fair few followers on the Abroad in Japan Facebook page, and after posting this photo, I got quite a lot of comments and even some messages. And I remember I looked through the messages, and there was one from a girl called Lucy. And lo and behold, she was like, "Oh my god, Chris, I'm in Asakusa now as well. Let's meet up, let's grab a coffee together." But I was sort of in a hurry to get over to Shibuya on the other side of town to meet a friend because I was only in Tokyo for a few days. So I didn't reply, and I felt a little bit guilty, but I carried on just going about my day. About an hour later, I went to Asakusa station and I got inside the train to take me to Shibuya. So I got on the train and sit down and get the old phone out, trying to look cool. And a few moments later, a door opens at the other end of the empty carriage and a foreign girl gets on the train. And she looks around, sort of sees me, and looked really surprised all of a sudden. And right away, I knew, I could feel it, that she must know who I am to have this kind of reaction. She walks over, really excited, and says, "Oh my god, Chris, is that you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think it is me." And she's like, "I can't believe what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm getting on the train, going to Shibuya." And she's like, "Oh my god, I'm going to Shibuya as well." And she sits down next to me and she pulls out her phone. She's like, "God, you probably won't believe this, but I actually just sent you a message on the Facebook page asking if you'd like to hang out." At this point, I'm like, "Oh god, no, it's the girl from the message that I didn't reply to an hour ago. What are the odds of all the foreigners getting onto a train in Asakusa?" And I pretend to be surprised and sort of say, "Oh, really? You sent me a message?" And she's like, "Yeah, look at this." And she pulls out her phone and she's like, "Yeah, I sent you a message on Facebook. Here, this is the message. Oh, it says you've read it, but there's no reply." And I'm like, "Really? No." She's like, "Yeah, you read it, but you didn't reply to it." And in my head, I'm like, "Oh, this is awkward. Fucking read receipt bollocks." So I did what any honest person would do. I lied. I pulled out my phone And I went, oh, let me have a look at the message. Oh, I have a team that go through like my messages. They read them for me. I just don't have time. And she's like, oh, your team read your messages. And I'm like, yeah. The team, they read the messages. The team, my team that I definitely have. Thankfully, she believed me, or she pretended to believe me, and suddenly the whole thing felt a lot less uncomfortable. And to be fair, she was very nice, and we spent the next half hour on the train going to Shibuya together, just talking about her trip to Japan. So in a way, I guess her message, her request to hang out, actually came true. But I like Lucy, she was nice, she was really cool, and what happens when you have a good awkward encounter, when someone recognises you at the perfect moment? So the best time I've ever been recognised was a few years ago when a good friend of mine came to Japan and I was showing him around, and his name was actually Dave. He's a real Dave, and he's in a video as well briefly. But Dave was in Japan for a week and I was giving him a sort of whirlwind tour of Tokyo. And I knew Dave loved the movie Lost in Translation, which was filmed at the Park Hyatt Hotel in central Tokyo in Shinjuku. So I thought I would take Dave there to the New York Bar and Grill and sort of impress him and get what is unquestionably one of the best nighttime views of Tokyo anywhere in the city. For that reason, if you do go to the New York Bar and Grill, always try and get a window seat so you can enjoy that view. And I remember when I booked that reservation a few days in advance online, I wrote a note saying window seat onegaishimasu. We got there on the day and a kind Japanese female member of staff escorted us to our seats, and they were the worst seats in the entire restaurant. There was no view. Honestly, you could see more of Tokyo from Spain than you could from that fucking table. So I was a little bit disappointed. I sort of said to the staff, you know, is there any window seats going? And they were like, no there isn't. And I went, oh, bugger. I was quite disappointed. But Dave, he was being nice. He was like, oh, this is a great chair. And I was like, yeah, sure. And then about 1 minute later, a smartly dressed guy comes around the corner, blonde hair, blue eyes, he's foreign, and in English, with a hint of Swiss German, he sort of says, your seats are ready for you, Mr. Broad. And I was like, what? But we hastily got out the seats and he ushered us to a table and he gestured and he said, these are the best seats in the house, the greatest table, this is what we use for when people want to propose, do a proposal. And sure enough, it is the best table in the entire restaurant. And the manager sort of disappears, we sit down, he comes back with a bottle of champagne, starts pouring it away, and he says, what brings you to Tokyo, Chris? And I'm like, well, I'm just showing Dave around. And he's like, wow, man, I love Abroad in Japan. I watch it all the time. I watched it before I came here to Japan, and it's great to have you here in the restaurant. And he put the bottle of half-finished champagne in the ice bucket and left us to it. And it turned out this brilliant, handsome, wonderful young man was the manager of the entire restaurant. I have never had that sort of VIP treatment before then, and I don't think I've ever had it since. But after the manager left us at our table, my good friend Dave, who was unsurprisingly quite impressed by this, was like, wow, Chris, does this happen often? And I was like, yeah, YouTuber life, innit? Happens every week, mate. Happens every week. It doesn't, and it's never happened since, as I said. But well done to the manager at the Park Hyatt New York Grill. You made me feel like a king that day. Though I do worry there was a couple at that table, and the guy was like about to get down and propose, and the manager just walked over and went, move away, get away from the table, Abroad in Japan's in town. That's definitely what happened in my imagination. But that is probably my favourite encounter. And there's certainly a lot more that I could talk about, both good and bad. As I said at the start, please do come and say hello if you see me in public. I won't bite, I won't eat you. Thank you for joining me on this third episode of the 12 Days of Christmas, guys. Be sure to check out the previous one on why everyone on Amazon hates me, and the episode before that, where I revealed the one thing to do in each and every one of Japan's 47 prefectures. As for me, I'll be back in the next couple of days for the next episode of the 12 Days of Christmas. Be sure to subscribe to the Chris Abroad channel if you haven't already. And now, if you don't mind me, I'm going to eat this delicious plastic bowl of fish. It's incredible, isn't it? Look at the detail on this. From like here, it really does look real. I actually feel really hungry now for real fish. I think I'll do that instead of eating plastic. I don't think that'd be a nice end to the video, watching me choke to death on plastic fish. Ugh.